Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar from the Virginia Public Access Project. I'm David Poole, the Executive Director, and our goal here today is to talk about what to expect on election night and thereafter as results come in. VPAP has been doing live election results for a decade, and we've had to kind of relearn everything based on the changes in the laws and the procedures this year. So we'll walk you through that. We're fortunate to have be joined today with Jessica Bowman. She's the Chief Deputy Commissioner of the State Department of Elections, and also Jason Kostick, data developer for VPAP. If you anything on our website that involves data, he has had a hand in it. So first, let me just tell you, we'll present here. We expect it to go about an hour. There is a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to ask questions. We will try to get to them, as many of them as possible. The first half will be of the program will be me interviewing Jessica Bowman, talking about these changes from her perspective and what they might be expecting at the State Department of Elections that night. And then the second half will be spent, Jason will be going over and showing the web pages that we built for this year's election night and actually election week coverage. So, so please feel free to ask questions. We'll try to save as much time as possible. Let me just say quickly a little bit about the Virginia Public Access Project. We're a nonpartisan nonprofit group, and our mission is to elevate public understanding of Virginia politics by presenting information that's easily understandable. Our board is half Republican, half Democrat. We don't care who wins on Tuesday. We simply want to be able, the only thing we care about is that the public has the ability to quickly see the results and understand what's happening in this kind of week-long process. So with that, I'll introduce Jessica. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you.
First of all, just say before we get started, what advice would you have to anyone in the audience that's planning to have their own Zoom conference on election night to basically have an election night party? Should they start later than normal this year?
So I've attended quite a few election night parties in my day, David, and they always start early and end late. I'm not sure this would be any different this year. You can start later if you want, but then you may have to cut back on the beer, wine, and snacks. So it will definitely be a later night, and even you could have an election week party, because we're going to talk about how election night has become election week. So it's a good way to look at it.
Well, speaking of week, we've read some national reports that the presidential election may be so close, and the process in some states may take days or even weeks before results are known. Fortunately, I don't think we're looking at that kind of delay in Virginia. And can you tell us kind of what to expect? Why is it that Virginia might be sooner than some states?
Sure. Virginia is in a really good position, especially compared to other states around the country, and that's for a couple of reasons. The main one being is that local registrars around the Commonwealth can pre-process absentee ballots. So they can bring in officers of election representing each political party, open the envelopes, get the ballots out of the envelopes, and put it through a scanner, much like anyone would do when they're voting in person, either early or on election day. There are certain states in the country that you can't even open an envelope until election day. And in the Commonwealth, that would mean localities would currently have 800,000 envelopes that would need to be opened on that day to get those results. So that's one and the biggest point of why we're in a good position. Some other things that have occurred, we also send out absentee ballots 45 days before election day, and that's a lot earlier than most states do, which allows people more time to get them back. So here is my plug. If you have not turned in your absentee ballot yet, there are over 300,000 of you out there. Please return it as soon as possible. You can drop it off at your registrar's office, a drop-off location, or at your polling place on election day. But please do it as soon as possible if you're interested in election night results sooner.
Great. Well, so what we're telling people is, the election night on Tuesday may look very much like many election nights. The results for some localities will come in as quickly as they normally do, and that might include the absentee ballots. But the mail ballots do present the challenge, and I guess the concern is that you could, in some large localities, you could have at 5 o'clock on election day, you could have the postman show up with 8 trays of mail ballots, or you could have voters drop them off at the registrar's drop boxes or at their polling stations, and that you could have a big rush of these, and it would just be too much to count late at night. So talk to us about what the Department of Elections has tried to set up to avoid this kind of situation where a county like Fairfax County, which could have will have hundreds of thousands of ballots tabulated and ready to release, they can't release them because they're still maybe counting just a few hundred or a few thousand votes.
Sure. So like you said, this is going to vary by locality and what time of the ballots come in and what kind of equipment that locality has and how fast they can count them. New this year, we have given guidance to localities that at 11 o'clock, they are to stop processing absentee ballots and go ahead and report those numbers in the central absentee precinct. That would be a combination of early votes in person and all the mail ballots. We did this because we think, people could stay up till 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. counting ballots as they have done in the past. But a new law passed by the General Assembly back in the winter, actually before COVID-19, allows absentee ballots that are postmarked on election day or prior to be counted till Friday at noon. So regardless if a locality has 2,000, 5,000 ballots come in on election day, or they literally have 5 ballots come in on election day, they will still have to count after election day any ballots that come in, or voters now have the option to cure their absentee ballot if there was a deficiency up until that Friday at noon deadline as well. So at 11 o'clock, we're telling everybody, hey, you've done all that you can. Close out your machines and do the end of the night processes. That does not mean everyone should start refreshing their page at 11:02. It does take localities some time to shut those machines down, print tapes, and put their information in our system that we later display. So if all goes well, maybe by midnight, of course we never know what's going to happen, but that's, if you go to bed early, you might want to stay up late that night, depending on what happens. And we'll show you a little bit later in the program what we have planned in VPAP to make it really easy for the public to understand which localities have not yet reported their central absentee precincts. And interesting enough, Jessica, you and I may be the only people that know this fun fact, but it used to be maybe, and of course Jason knows it, but maybe a dozen localities did not have central absentee precincts until this year. And there's only one locality that still does not have a central absentee precinct. That will be a trivia question maybe in our later in the program. So you mentioned the second change this year, and that is the votes can come in after 7 o'clock on election day, and that is mail ballots that arrive and are not arrive, but are specifically delivered by the United States Postal Service can be considered at that point up until really any ballot that arrives by noon on Friday. Is that correct? Yes, and that is a change. Usually it's 7 p.m. on election night, and kind of the deck is set at that point. But as long as that postmark is there election night or prior to, that ballot will count if it arrives in the registrar's office by USPS by noon on Friday.
So you and I have had this conversation, and what if you had a situation where a race was very, very close, far after the results all come in on election night, literally 50 votes separate the two candidates. And then the question becomes, boy, I wonder how many potential ballots are out there that could still come in. And we've been getting ready to provide a precise number. How precise can we be at that point? Will people be able to be about how many ballots potentially could come in?
Sure. So it's a great question, and it's a tricky question. Of course, rarely ever do all the absentee ballots come back. Hardly ever do you have a 100% return rate. I think right now there's one locality that has an 86% return rate that's leading the way, but never do you get to that 100%, everything that you send out comes back. Also, if people decide to surrender their ballots on election day, we will not know that for a little while. Or if people decide to show up and they have received a ballot, but let's say it never got to their house or their dog ate it, that's happened this year, then they can cast a provisional ballot. And as long as an absentee ballot does not come in, that vote will count. But those things are very manual things that happen at polling places on election day. And we wouldn't want to, say a number that doesn't make sense. We rather be accurate than fast. So those sort of things will take a bit of time, but it is important to remember I don't think have seen a 100% return on absentee ballots. David, you can probably speak more to past data on that, but it will be tricky to get a precise number just because voters do have those options. If you want to vote in person on election day, take your ballot with you so you can cast a regular ballot. But if it's lost, if your dog ate it, you will be able to cast a provisional and it will count.
Right. And so just a quick, if someone does have to cast a provisional ballot for the reason that you just stated, that they either lost their their mail ballot or they forgot to bring it in, is there any further action required on their part, or tell us what happens after that?
Yeah, so if the reason for casting a provisional ballot is because that you have lost your absentee ballot that was issued to you, there is no further action a voter needs to take as long as you didn't return your absentee ballot. Of course, we know that it is illegal both on a state and federal level to vote twice, no matter what anyone says. So please don't try that at home, as they were to say.
I've got a question. I know when this issue of ballots coming in and being postmarked, and that was a specific part of the law that that was a proof that the ballot was received on or before election day. And there was some concern that the envelopes that went out were going to have a kind of a postmark stamp that not a stamp but an indicia that often aren't postmarked. And so there was concern that there would be a lot of ballots that just lacked the postmark. So the General Assembly came up with a solution during a special session to appropriate, I believe it was $2 million, so that localities could actually put stamps on the return. And postmark concern. Why then did the department or the Board of Elections kind of pass a regulation that said, well, if the postmark is blank, then it will be acceptable? Why was that necessary? And is it unusual to pass a regulation that overturns a law?
Yeah, so my comments will be limited in this area because there is pending litigation going on, but I will correct you just a bit. So the General Assembly back in their regular session in the winter did pass a law that says if it's postmarked election day or prior, it counts, period, end of story.
Mhm.
So this summer, the State Board of Elections passed a regulation. This was before the special session got called, to go ahead and give guidance because we know issues come up. Elections, I find a new issue every day that somehow no one's heard before in the hundreds of years we've been having elections. And the state board before election day wanted to go ahead and give guidance to say, hey, what if you give an envelope back that doesn't have a postmark? Or what if it got wet and the postmark is smeared and you can't see it? So they went ahead and gave that guidance that it should count, that voters should not be punished because your envelope got wet when your USPS carrier was delivering it. So then the General Assembly came into special session and allocated $2 million to have localities provide prepaid postage. This happened late in the process, obviously. It was around 2 weeks before ballots went out. And so some localities that did not utilize business reply mail simply used stamps or metered mail. And metered mail is what you're talking about that sometimes doesn't get a postmark. However, USPS, it is their policy. We have worked with them extensively that all election mail get a postmark, regardless if it's metered or not. If it has that election mail insignia, that it will get a postmark. So the State Board of Election regulation was just to make sure we had all bases covered. If something were to happen, we do not believe that would be substantial. We just, try to prepare for things around here as one-offs inevitably happen.
Well, thanks. Well, I'll turn, before I turn to the questions from the audience, Jessica, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Sure. So once again, I'm going to say it till I'm blue in the face, please return your absentee ballot if you have it. At this point, please just go ahead and drop it off at your registrar's office at a drop-off location. If you want to vote early, you can still do so through Saturday. So maybe your new trick-or-treating this year can be to vote early in person. If you are voting on election day, please bring a mask. Please respect that, social distance and other sanitation requirements. We expect there will be lines on election day. There usually are in presidential, even with all these early voters. So also please bring your patients. Great.
So several people have asked questions about tracking their ballots. They mailed them in. And they're still kind of waiting. It still says, weeks later, it says it's in transit. What advice do you have to people who might be concerned about kind of where is their ballot in the process?
Sure. So if the Ballot Scout tool doesn't work for you, so if the tool that says in transit received has all these steps in green, if that is not working, you can go to our citizen portal, which is where you register to vote, where you requested your absentee ballot. You can log in, check registration status. You will scroll down and you'll see your entire voting history, including the ballot that you got this year. So it will say, issued, and then when it's received, it will give the date that the registrar received it. And that means that registrar actually scanned it in to our voter registration system. So that's an alternative for people to use if Ballot Scout is not working properly.
And we've got several questions about this kind of 2 election nights, right? When will the central absentee precincts, will they be updated all along or just at 2 points in the process? Can you clarify that for us?
Sure. So it will be kind of 2 points. You will not get new totals on Wednesday, new totals on Thursday, new totals on Friday. After the noon Friday deadline, localities will update those central absentee precinct numbers. For some localities, that may be 12:05 on Friday. For other localities, if they've gotten a lot of ballots in, it could be later, even into Saturday, perhaps. We have no way of knowing what that volume is. The other thing to be on the lookout for is provisional ballots. Those are also counted the days after the election. So if we have a bunch of people that show up on election day that they've lost their absentee ballot or their dog ate it, those will all be provisional votes that have to be accounted for in the canvass.
There's some more questions about election results and when they'll be announced. Could some localities just simply report their cap right at 7 o'clock and then, have a bunch of stuff to, count the next day? Is that an option, or are you asking them to put some effort into counting some of them, at least?
We are asking localities to count as much as they can. It is a very long day. It's been a very long year. So, we are asking them to get through as much as possible.
And I was once an election officer in the city of Richmond. I was during the 2008 general election, and I remember by the end of the night, I don't know, it'd been like 15 or 16 hours. They put something in front of me to sign, and it could have said I killed my mother, and I would have signed it to get out of there. I know it is a long night and difficult job. Let me look through some of these other questions. Sorry, as they come in issue, and this is a question that really is, I think everyone has to keep in mind, this is not just one election happening in Virginia. This is 133 elections run by people with varied funding, varied managerial experience, varied expertise, and perhaps varied political outlooks. Anyway, so how the ballots are being counted, do you have any sense, what would you say for the mail ballots coming in, what would you say is the best practice, and how many localities do you think are following that best practice?
So I'll start off by saying, as you said, there's 133 elections, and as we see, not one size fits all. Fairfax County, for instance, hundreds of thousands of ballots literally coming in. It makes sense for them to have a team that works every day to process those ballots. Back where I'm from, in Carroll County, Virginia, it may not make sense because she, will only have 1,000 or so, and she knows that she can get through them all on election day or just the weekend prior to election day, like they've always done. So it really varies based on localities, but you bring up a very good issue about local election funding. That is done at a locality level. And so you will see that jurisdictions that have decided to invest money in their registrar's offices do have more staff, do have teams of people. There are others that, are 2-people offices at the end of the day. And we just all owe them a huge debt of gratitude for what they've accomplished this year.
Right. One more question. I've lost it here. Oh, this came up. We did a session for reporters earlier today, and somebody said they came in to vote on that day where the cable got cut and there was a blackout on the registration day. And the people that came in to vote that day were told to vote, they voted provisionally because the poll books were down, and no one can look up to see if they were actually a registered voter. Is there anything additional action needed by those people, or is that being cured by looking people up after the fact? Where does that stand?
Sure. So, yeah, that was a great day around here, David. Thanks for bringing that back up.
I'm sorry.
But for those voters that did have to vote a provisional ballot, no other action is needed as long as you were qualified, to vote. There won't be any problems making your vote count, and no further action is needed.
Great. Okay. Well, Jessica, thank you so much. This has been very helpful and informative, and good luck to everybody in your team with the election night. As a group that's downstream from you and getting your data feed, I hope everything is just smooth as silk on your end.
Me too.
All right. Well, I want to turn this around now and talk about the election night from VPAP's perspective. And as we said, we had to kind of redesign our pages this year. And we're thinking of the election as in 3 distinctive time periods. And Jason Kostick, who is our data developer, he's been here since 2016. This is Jason's 2nd presidential election as the pilot of our ship. He's handling all the data we do. And I want to talk first, though. We're about to release a data visual, and I want to share it with the audience here first. And that is kind of how to think about what the results might look like with such an elevated absentee vote. And assuming 2 things: absentees precincts are usually voted or reported later than most in-person precincts for a locality. And then the second thing is there's been polls, and the data we looked at suggests that the absentee vote is much heavier Democratic. So what does it mean when you kind of pull a lot of Democratic votes out of precincts and put them into one single unit? So I'm going to ask Rachel to spin up this visual, and I hope this makes sense. This is from, before you start it, can you hold on a second? I'm sorry. You can. This is from 2018. This is the 7th congressional district race. It's the Brett Spanberger race, which is a very close race, won by Abigail Spanberger. And we want to show you a timeline of how the results came in that night, and then how they would have come in. The exact same results, no change in any votes, if there had been an elevated absentee count like this year. So, Rachel, go ahead. So this is how the votes actually came in that evening. And this is what it would have looked like. The results are exactly the same, and let me explain a couple of things about this visual. If people have been following the results as they came in through the night, Brad would have had a sizable lead the whole night. At 9:30 at night in 2018, by that point, 90% of the results had been reported. But if the absentees had been as heavy as this year, only 2/3 of the votes had been reported by 9:30. And so what that means is later in the evening, and that race really, it couldn't be called until the Henrico and Chesterfield absentee precincts came in, which were overwhelmingly for Spanberger. And in fact, she got 6% of her vote. All the votes she received across the entire district were from those 2 central absentee precincts. If that were, we've estimated that it would have this year, if the absentees have been as high as this year, with the exact same results last year, 38%, almost 40% of her votes would have come from those 2 central absentee precincts. Bratt would have been seen ahead for well into the night, and it wouldn't have changed. You can see in 2018, it kind of flip-flopped, and she took the lead for good at 9:30. That would not have happened until 11 at night. So that's just one thing to keep in mind as we watch results. And it depends on how big localities, particularly in Northern Virginia, they're Democratic, how late they come in. Because we're talking about significant numbers of votes. So it's going to change the way elections, the election results come in through the night. And I hope that makes sense. And Rachel, if you could take that down, that'd be great. And so I want to talk to you, just talk to Jason a little bit. When we talk about election results, we're not just talking about one set of results. Can you explain to people where VPAP, we get our data feed on election night?
Sure, thanks, David. So for the past couple of election cycles, VPAP has had two data sources for election night results. Our primary source of data is the Virginia Department of Elections public data feed, which is provided in both CSV and JSON formats. And this source really is critical to VPAP due to its granularity. It provides the most atomic level of results down to the precinct, and also the most comprehensive level of results by including all local elections and candidates. And our secondary source of data comes from a paid subscription to the Associated Press, which is limited to just statewide and legislative or congressional races. So having this second data source provides VPAP with some level of redundancy, which of course is needed when dealing with any kind of mission critical technology. And as mentioned before, unfortunately the AP does not provide the level of detail that the Department of Elections public feed does. However, we have seen that the AP data feed can sometimes be more up to date with its top level results. And one could also argue that sometimes it's a bit more reliable in terms of its availability. So if we do have any kind of issue with one data feed, we can at least fall back on another to provide results and keep the main portions of our election pages up and running.
Jason, I just want to add that you mentioned that sometimes the AP is ahead of the state board. Yeah, I know, and I don't know if they still do this in Winchester, where they still have the old-fashioned chalkboard, and as the precincts come in, they put them up on the chalkboard, and once they're all in, then they go type them into the state system, and then the state gets them. So, I think everyone, if you remember election results in the 2015 Senate races, Powhatan County came in huge in the 10th Senate district, but they didn't report. They were reporting their results out publicly, but they weren't feeding it into the state Department of Elections. It wasn't the problem that the State Department of Elections feed was behind. It's just like, as I always say, the State Department data is only what localities choose to tell it. And if they don't tell it in time, so that's the great advantage of having two feeds, is that we are always assured that we have the most updated information anywhere, and we blend that together. All right, so Jason, and maybe you can share your screen and let's walk through the three different phases of election results that will last from Tuesday until Friday. Tell us what's new and what to expect.
Sure. Yeah, if Rachel can just let me screen share here, I can put this up on for everybody to view. All right, so hopefully you can see this now. So as David mentioned, we're planning on something that's a little more like an election week than just one night. So therefore, we've kind of broken our election result pages out into three phases. Phase one will look, as you can see, kind of like our typical Tuesday night pages, with all the normal elements showing a candidate's votes and maps, etc. However, one thing that we'll be doing is shifting focus away from the traditional percentage or number of precincts reporting, and instead providing a little more insight into the percentage of what we're calling expected votes reported. So VPAP will be performing calculations and modeling before and after before and during election night to determine how many votes we can expect to be cast in person on election day, and also how many ballots that have been cast prior to election day. And as you can see, we'll try to translate those calculations into some easy to understand visual elements of what percentages of expected votes have been reported. And this will be available for each statewide race and for the 11 congressional races. So, we believe that this gives a much clearer picture of how complete the results are, rather than just precincts reporting, which can be a little bit misleading for this election season. So in addition to this new element here, our users on Tuesday will also have the option of clicking through to details. And so what this shows is it's details on absentee votes, absentee ballots cast before election day. And it'll show which localities still have outstanding ballots to tabulate. And also for each locality that has a certain percentage of election day votes or precincts reported, we'll also provide a simple visual cue in the form of one of those red or blue tiles to show the current partisanship of the locality. So our goal here is really to give our users the ability to get a quick glance at which localities have yet to report their central absentee precinct and how that locality has voted so far on election day. So we suspect that these pages will become a little more critical later in the night when a few large localities have yet to report their absentee results through that 11 p.m. deadline that's been discussed. And also one thing to note too is, like, on every page, we'll try to include these little info icons, which will kind of explain our calculations and resulting numbers. And we really want to make sure that we're as transparent as possible in how we arrived at any particular number or outcome. So that'll be phase one, which is through election night on Tuesday, November 3rd. And then for phase two, which will be phase two of election week, which will kind of be that period of time just after all the election day precincts have been reported and all absentee ballots reported through 11 p.m. on election day, which will likely be that Wednesday morning to Friday afternoon time range. During this period, our goal is to show, one, what the race margin is between the two candidates, and two, what is potentially still outstanding. And so when our users click through to details on these potential outstanding votes, we'll provide a page that, again, reiterates the margin of the race for the leading candidates, and then also breaks out these potentially outstanding ballots into a few different categories. So the first category is provisional ballots, as you can see, which comes from the estimated provisional counts per locality as provided by the Department of Elections. And these provisional ballots are handled and reported a little bit differently. We've talked about them a little bit before in the program from normally cast ballots. And so they may include situations where the voter requested an absentee ballot, but decided to vote in person on election day and didn't bring their original absentee ballot with them. Or maybe their name couldn't be found in a poll book, or maybe the precinct's voting machines go offline, among many other situations. So due to the high volume of mail ballot requests, we expect that these provisional ballot counts will be a bit inflated compared to previous elections. Looking at the 2016 presidential, you might see a couple of dozen to maybe a few hundred provisional ballots, but we're kind of expecting maybe that to be into the thousands for some larger localities. So the second number here you see mail ballot applications. That's going to come from the Department of Elections daily absentee file that VPAP subscribes to, and it'll include all outstanding absentee mail applications that do not have a corresponding return ballot. Thus, they could potentially come in by that Friday noon deadline. So just like provisional ballots, we kind of expect that this category of outstanding applications is going to be inflated with people who either voted provisionally or in person on election day. And the last category, the mail ballots received, these will be actual mail ballots that have been received but were not tabulated during that first phase of absentee reporting. And this number, I think we've mentioned before, is going to be hard to pin down, and we'll likely have to gather it from a bunch of different sources, including each locality's registrar and the Department of Elections. So, with the understanding that there will be some level of imprecision with these numbers, we think that having all of these three categories in place, along with the margin for the race, can allow our users to know like which race outcomes could be affected by any potentially outstanding ballots once the registrars begin to tabulate those after Election Day. And then this last little section here will show how the partisanship of absentee voting for that race is different from Election Day voting. And it also allowed VPAP to include some notes and updates on specific races that we think are important. And then for our third and final phase, we will essentially have a trimmed down version of Tuesday night. So we expect Friday afternoon to be a little bit like our election night, with results flowing in from each locality. We'll have a simple kind of accounting style format showing previously tabulated results on Election Day. Then the second line item will be tabulated results of what is coming in that Friday, and then the unofficial total underneath that. And just like election night, we'll be updating these every 5 to 10 minutes as they come in from the Department of Elections. And one important note is that the unofficial results won't be completed until Monday, November 9th, which is the deadline for localities to consider provisional ballots. And in addition to this, we'll include a second central absentee precinct for our precinct level maps and precinct listings when a user drills through to a locality, so they can see that second set of absentee results. Yeah, we're really excited to see how this election week plays out. I don't know if excited is the right word. A little bit scared, a little bit excited to see how this election week plays out. But we're really hoping that the pages that we've built and the calculations that we've created will really help to provide some insight into what's going on within each race. So yeah, we really look forward to all of those constant page refreshes next week.
So I've got, thanks, Jason, I really appreciate it. Jessica, I'm glad you stuck around because there's a bunch of questions coming in, and I'm just gonna fire these out. These might be quick yes or no. Someone said, I voted early in person. Am I an absentee voter? That's what Judge Cairns wants to know.
Your vote will be recorded in the central absentee precinct.
So the central absentee precincts is a combination of those who vote early in person and who vote by mail, whose ballots are received and counted, well, yes, by election night.
Yep.
Right. Okay. And Jason, the question someone said, that's really cool. And maybe Jessica, it might be Jason probably know quicker how to find it. Where could someone find this live feed of Department of Election results?
Sure.
Go ahead, Jason.
No, it's your website. You go ahead.
No, our JSON files on our election night results page at the top.
Okay. I have a question from Magley Hurst and Alexandria. They said when they voted there in the city of Alexandria, they had to sign an affidavit that they would not submit any mail ballots if they get one in the mail. Is there anything else needed on their behalf? Or as long as, do they need to come in and plead their case, or will their vote count automatically?
Yes. They probably signed a form that was on gold paper, got a regular ballot, and put it through the scanner.
Right.
Just don't vote twice.
Is their vote still provisional at this point? Or?
It depends if they got a provisional envelope, there's still no need to do anything. I would have to know the specifics. Okay, but in general, if no one mails in their ballot, this is for someone who requested a mail ballot and then decides to vote in person. As long as that mail ballot doesn't ever show up, they should be fine. Correct. And if the mail ballot does show up,
one, it won't be counted, and two, somebody might be calling them?
Don't vote twice.
All right. So there was a question some people wanted to know about, do localities have enough people to volunteer, the poll workers? What have you heard? I've heard in some places they're having to turn people away, but is that the case everywhere?
Yeah, so that's one silver lining to this whole COVID election whirlwind experience, is we have had over 20,000 Virginians sign up to help work the polls, as our usual poll workers are in the high risk category of COVID-19. It's been really inspiring to see. So as far as we know, all localities are fully staffed for election day, maybe even more so than needed.
I've got a question from an officer of election in Henrico County who wants to know, have you thought about increasing the pay of officers of elections?
That can be done by the General Assembly or your local government.
Right. Jason, a question for you. Will we have results on our website for the referendum campaigns, particularly the constitutional amendment on redistricting and local elections?
Yeah, so all of the elections that are available on your ballot will be on our pages for election night. We'll have the presidential, obviously the Senate, all the congressional races. We'll have the statewide referendums, referenda, and then we'll also have all local races and local referenda as well. I think 2019 was the first time where we actually did all local races, and people seem to really respond positively. So we'll have those again for everybody.
Okay, and this may be a question for both of you, but Jessica, is there any point? Is at any point tonight will there'll be a big thing on the state election saying, once all the absentee ballots have been reported statewide, is that going to be like some banner to say, "Da, this, these are the results as of now. Check back on Friday." Is there anything? Or maybe I should step back and say, hey, we showed what we were going to do differently on our website. Can you talk about what the Department of Elections is going to do differently on yours?
Yeah, so, we won't have any confetti or anything of that nature, but you will be able to see on the very front page that how many precincts out of how many precincts are reporting. So when all of those precincts are done, you will know that everything has been reported. Okay,
and this is a question that is near and dear to VPAP's heart. Somebody wants to know if central absentee votes are not attributed to their precinct, how are we ever going to know what the voter behavior is changing year over year if the state doesn't credit the votes back to the precinct? Is that something that's done in other states, and what would it take for that to happen in Virginia?
Yes, so the Commonwealth has never been set up that way. That doesn't mean we can't be in the future. There was actually legislation this year in the General Assembly. That bill got pulled by its patron, but I think it's definitely something everyone's going to be looking at in the future.
Yeah, we would love, we're having to de-emphasize our precinct level results. Just because in some precincts, in Falls Church, you might have, 5% of the voters in some precincts, but, and you end up with self-selected cranks like me who, are stubborn and want to vote in person. And it might not necessarily reflect the population of the precinct. So talk to us about the correction process. This issue came up yesterday, and what if somebody forgets to send in an envelope, forgets to sign something or check a box, something that's material that would otherwise mean that the absentee vote, the mail vote, would be rejected. And we've seen newspaper stories about some states, large numbers of votes being rejected. What is the process in Virginia?
Yeah, so in the special session of the General Assembly that I think is still ongoing, actually, the General Assembly passed language for this November election only that voters could cure their ballots. Cure is what we call it in election world. So if your ballot has a deficiency that would invalidate it, such as you didn't put the inner envelope in the outer envelope, or you forgot to sign the inner envelope, something of that nature, a registrar will contact you either by email, phone, or if those don't work, by letter, stating that something was deficient on your ballot and how you can correct it. They will do that within 3 days of finding the deficiency, and you have until November 6th at noon to remedy that.
Okay. Now I've got some more questions coming in. I know this is going to be, people are asking this question. They're going to be asking this question until 7 o'clock on Tuesday and beyond. What if somebody requested an absentee mail ballot? They changed their mind. They went in and voted in person. And then their ballot arrives in the mail a few days later. What should they do at that point, if anything?
I would call your local general registrar to tell them that you have received it, and they will instruct you further.
Okay. All right. Great. So I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. This is a localities can report their central absentee precincts as soon as it's completed, or at any time of the night, right? The 11 o'clock. So you could be seeing some central absentee precincts coming in at 8:30, 7:30.
Yep, sure.
The 11 o'clock simply means if you're still counting at 11 o'clock, please stop counting, close out your central absentee precinct, and report what votes have been tabulated at that point.
Yes.
Is that correct? And then any votes that arrive before 7 o'clock, mail votes that arrive before 7 o'clock on election day, should be put aside, and you come back the next day and just continue
Correct.
counting.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Localities across the Commonwealth have been doing a great job of pre-processing these ballots. So it very well could be the case that everything is processed that they have when they walk in on election morning, and they don't get, especially smaller localities, they don't get that many ballots back on that day, and they can report that as soon as it is done. So we're not locking everything down till 11 o'clock. If it's done at 7:30, they can put it in at 7:30 and go home after everything else is in.
Yeah, as I said before, I think you could see some local races. You could even see some congressional races. The results be completed by 8:30, 9 o'clock, like normal. It's very.
We can
possible.
always hope.
It just depends. I can always hope. That's right. So I guess I should ask this question for you, Jessica. There's been news reports. There was when in-person voting started up in Fairfax County, you had caravans of Trump supporters honking and waving flags and going by. And there's been reports of people coming and perhaps demonstrating and disrupting. What do you know about that, and what can you tell people about what the Department of Elections is doing about that potential situation?
Sure. The Department of Elections, not just for this election, but for all elections, have great relationships with federal, state, and local law enforcement and other agencies. So everyone from local sheriffs to the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI. We work in conjunction with them all year. We have a war room, so to speak, on election day where everyone is together. So if a voter, it is illegal to hinder or delay a voter, or if they feel uncomfortable, they should talk to their election official that's at that polling place where it is occurring. Of course, if they feel it's an emergency situation, they should call law enforcement. But our chief officers of election around the Commonwealth, it is not their first election. Sometimes there can be very annoying people no matter the election, and they are trained to handle it. So let your local election official know unless it's an emergency, and then of course call law enforcement.
Okay, great. And Joanna Crane asked a question about VPAP's 3 phases of election night results. And I guess I can just say they'll be on our website and they'll change automatically. So on election night, the first phase of the results that Jason showed you will be there. And we hope to hopefully have that first page up with no results in it, of course, by Monday. So you can become familiar with the navigation of it. And then on Wednesday, we'll automatically just refresh it, and then the next page will be shown, right? And then again on Friday afternoon. So those things which happen organically, and the results and pages will be set up to adjust to the circumstances as they change. Well, I guess we've been going for 2 hours. I really appreciate, we've had a ton of questions. I count 65 questions, people, actually 72 questions that people have submitted. I hope, I'm sorry we haven't been able to get to all of them, but I hope we've gotten to most of them. So Jessica, thank you so much for your time. I know you're super busy. I deeply appreciate you coming and help everyone understand what's going to happen next week and the State Board of Elections position.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And make sure on election night, there's 2 places you can tune into, the Department of Elections and VPAP for all the results. Stay with us, and thanks for your support. Good afternoon.